Good morning, Frank. Good afternoon or good night, in fact.
You're muted.
It's about 7 o'clock in the evening, so you can say anything.
Nice to see you, man. How are you doing these days?
I'm doing well, can't complain. With the restrictions we all go through in the last 1.5 years or more, but otherwise doing fine.
Are you completely done with HP? Are you completely involved
Yes,
with the LaTeX project now?
I decided in 2015 actually already that I stopped working as an architect at HP and resigned. And since then, I'm only doing freelance work and largely devoting myself to research in LaTeX, yes.
Well, start telling me how does your day look like? How much time do you put in the LaTeX project? How much on other stuff?
Well, at the moment, not counting trying to finally finish the 3rd edition of the LaTeX Companion, which is sort of a side project. I spend right now the whole time on LaTeX and the tagging project, which is huge. And well, after that, I have other plans going into the same direction in terms of
wow,
of further research in typography, computer typesetting.
Well, I mean, my next question is related exactly to what you're talking about right now. I think you know, the first time I ever saw you talking, it was a talk in San Francisco at the end of the 80s where you were complaining about LaTeX. I don't know exactly.
You've been at this, is that a Stanford meeting? The one?
Oh yeah. Stanford is San Francisco Bay Area. So yeah, no, probably Stanford, most likely Stanford. Yeah. And
well,
I
if it
think
was in the end of the 80s, then it must have been, I guess. The one where Don decided that Tech 3 comes out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I walked into the talk, you know, under the belief that LaTeX was the most wonderful thing in the world, and I go there and I see this lunatic complaining about LaTeX. I said, "What the heck is this?" You know, and it took me years to process your talk. You know, it took me literally years to fully understand what was wrong with LaTeX. And you know, now in retrospective, I could see how correct you were, and I think that a drawback of that talk is that you inherited the LaTeX development. You know, so this guy's complaining. Let's give it to him.
that's more or less, in fact, what happening. And I mean, I was young and so bold and not seeing the consequences of all this. But basically, I started working with tech in the mid 80s or so, and discovered LaTeX as a draft manual. It was before the book came out. And I thought this was great ideas. And then I was trying to actually use that on the computers in the university, and it died on me because the computers didn't have enough memory to process LaTeX at that time. And so I had to implement my own format based on the ideas that Leslie put forward in his manual. And that gave me a huge sort of insight into all these inner workings, because I had to make it even smaller than it was back then as far as LaTeX is concerned. And so with this starting point, I and Rainer Schöpf, we sent an enormous amount of bug reports to Leslie when we finally managed to get LaTeX going on the university Baltic system. And then I got the chance to go to Stanford. And well, and then I gave this talk, what's wrong with all this? And I mean, we came from Europe. Basically, I came as sort of telling people why LaTeX is not a good thing, and also from Europe we came in this year to tell Don Knuth that he really should take care of his cultural background, coming basically with grandparents or so from Scandinavia and Germany, to actually take a little bit care about something like diacritics and so better than a 7-bit system could do. And that was a big thing in the Stanford meeting, that we actually managed to convince Don to produce Tech 3 when we basically finally sort of agreed that there is something that needs doing. And well, the other thing that happened was that I personally then met Leslie, and we had a long session there during the meeting and afterwards. And then he basically dropped that whole thing on me and on Rainer and Chris, and that was the start of it. So it was 89, yes.
So it was more a handover from him and from Leslie directly to you. So the community was not really involved, or there was much of the. How was
no? I mean, and that before that time, the whole development and maintenance of LaTeX. Well, there was no development happening anymore, but the maintenance, if there were bugs or so, you could send them to Leslie, and Leslie would potentially do something or not about it. It was all done by him at that time, and he wanted to move on. And so I think he was, in the end, he was quite glad about having somebody who says things are wrong, but not just pushing them to him, but actually being prepared to take it on. So we then jointly with Leslie, that was the idea, and this is what we actually did. We jointly devised LaTeX to a certain set of extensions after, beside the stuff that I said needs fixing, like getting better font support, getting a lot of things done that was not in LaTeX 209. But we also jointly worked on specifying the abstraction for the color support. Joseph spoke about that earlier, that this was implemented by David, but it was a joint effort between David, Leslie, Chris, and myself to work out those specs that then became graphics and color packages as the new standard. And this is part of what then ended up in Leslie's book. So his last involvement basically with LaTeX was doing that second edition of the book and going jointly together to release, if you like, the 2E version. But the actual coding for 2E, everything, which was quite a substantial change from 209 to 2E, he was not involved in that. He was only sort of a consultant at that time. And after this, he completely dropped out. Basically, he sometimes in the years after sent me a bug report or so because something in his research paper didn't work he expected it to be, or something like that. And yeah, so this is the way it worked. And in some sense, I think a great way for him to do it like this, because a lot of people can't get their baby grow up and just need to stick to it without actually then sort of keeping up with it in some sense. And he did that. I mean, he basically gave the whole responsibility and everything over to us, and did not interfere with it afterwards, which is great, because that actually allowed us to do a lot of things which otherwise would have been basically not possible, and probably LaTeX wouldn't be here anymore.
Well, so let me ask you something else. I mean, now, you know, I have a better perspective on this whole thing, and I kind of see things fall into place, you know, Caller with, you know, with the talk by Joseph just a few minutes ago, and things like accessibility, you know, and things like PDF reflow and so forth. So things are falling into place right now very nicely. Do you still have any complaints about LaTeX?
Oh, I have a lot of complaints, but yes and no. You're perfectly right in saying that things are currently starting or falling into place, and this is quite interesting because, in some sense, in the early 90s, so between after the time we took over from Leslie, and we were thinking of producing LaTeX 3. I mean, LaTeX 2 Epsilon was never meant to be, in some sense. The idea was, I mean, I went to Stanford and said, this is all wrong, and this is wrong, and mathematics doesn't work, and it should be put into LaTeX and not as a completely separate format, which it was back then, and all these kind of things. So we had these ideas that you could produce a much better LaTeX, and we actually produced a much better LaTeX during the years 1991, 92, and we actually had a new version of LaTeX that could compile its own manual. The only problem was the whole interview we are now doing wouldn't be enough to get the manual compiled, which was only about 100 pages. There were a lot of them. They were too early. They were about 2 decades. It says my internet connection is unstable. You can hear me?
Yeah, I can. It froze for a second, and then it came back.
Yeah, okay. It's this is not as old as the stuff we're talking about, but it's an old computer right now. Anyway, yeah. So we had all these ideas, and we had to abandon that. And I mean, there were lots of them. I mean, basically, what is nowadays known as cascading style sheets. We had that for LaTeX before it existed for HTML, but we gave it up because it was just not workable in a context of this. So all these kind of ideas were around and sometimes implemented. But now, after, well, what is it? 20, 30 years nearly by now. The problems that we tried to solve back then, and only very partially solved with 2E, they are still with us. And what is now falling into place is, in my view, that a lot of these ideas are still extremely current. And so by now, with computers being vastly more powerful, that you can do on your iPhone things that I couldn't have done with the computers I had back then, they are now sort of coming to fruit. I mean, they blossomed over the years, and I think last year I said, and layer underneath, inside the kernel, and we can actually use it. And we started making use of it last year. We built the hook management into LaTeX, which is now nicely being used in various packages already, and it is used by us. A lot of the ideas from back then can now be actually implemented and used. And as part of the tagging project, a lot of those harmonizations and improvements will happen because we will need that as part of making LaTeX accessible. And what Jonathan, what was his name? Godfrey said and rightly complained is LaTeX didn't change from 25 years ago to now in terms of what it could do in the sense of making accessible documents. That was just not possible in the past, but now it becomes possible, and it is possible. And so I have still a lot of complaints, but many of them will be addressed in the next years, and this is now a good thing, I think.
Well, nice. It's really nice to see this in fruition. I mean, it's I hear complaints about people, about waiting for LaTeX 3, but I came to realize that that I just need to be patient, and because the changes that were required were enormous, and you can't stop a train that is moving and change the wheels while it's running, and so I came to appreciate over the years, and I guess we'll just have to wait a little bit more and start. And I started to use some of these packages which are coming out of the LaTeX 3 project, and they all seem pretty nice and pretty round. And
yeah, I mean, this is certainly something you have to take into consideration. LaTeX has a huge user base, and in fact, in the last years, I think one can see that it is actually growing because there is quite a need for structured documentation nowadays, and LaTeX is pretty much well placed to produce that. And if we are now getting to the point that we can actually produce structured output as well, not just nice looking documents that have great mathematics inside or something, and have all the cross references properly resolved, in contrast to some other systems. But no, actually being able to have in some sense reusable accessible documents, and so LaTeX has a very good place in the world in the future as well. And I actually, my impression is that the user base is rather growing than lessening in the last years.
All right. So let me ask you a question, which is sort of I guess it's a matter of opinion as well. I mean, programs like InDesign and Word are sort of fast implementing tech goodies. InDesign and Word has had a plugin for math formulas for a number of years now. Where you can enter, mathematical formulas using LaTeX notation, and previously they would use their own algorithms to decide how the formula looked like. And over the last 8 years or so, both of them have abandoned their own processing of the formulas and have left it to tech. And so it uses literally tech algorithms to do the positioning, and InDesign right now is implementing microtypography and paragraph breaks, very much tech-like. I mean, the algorithms are out there. Knuth Plus and so forth are public, and so they're bringing it in. So you have this instance or where you have microcosms of tech within an interactive environment outside. I mean, do you see a chance that we will ever see an interactive LaTeX in the future?
A qualified no, I would say.
Qualified.
I mean, we have to be careful about what we're talking here. Something like the paragraph breaking, or how to display a formula in terms of spatial relationships, and so these are algorithms which are very sort of localized.
Localized.
I mean, that's fine, and in some sense, it was always surprising that even through something like the paragraph breaking algorithm was out there in the public, nobody else, like Word or so, took it up. And Leslie told me the story that, I mean, Leslie is employed by Microsoft, right?
Yeah.
These days, I mean, he's a researcher. He's not working for Microsoft. He's doing research paid by Microsoft, if you like. But anyway, he was talking to the Word development and said, "Well, why don't you do this? I mean, it's here. Here's the algorithm. Why is Word producing this horrible output?" And that department, the development people, they told him, "There's no market. We are not putting a complicated algorithm that produces problems for us to sort of maintain and everything into the product if the appreciation from the market is not there." So the Word market was targeted at something, at least in their thought, where an improved typographic quality would not actually be an improvement. Now, for something like InDesign, that is different. And to my understanding, InDesign was using the TUG algorithm for line breaking already for some time.
Yes.
Also, I don't know about the math formulas, but my understanding was they were using it for the paragraph breaking. But coming back to, if you have a designer tool like InDesign where you work page by page and the focus is on getting the pages right, you certainly want to have very good quality in terms of line breaking and getting sort of a shot at that automatically in the best possible manner. But the focus with working with InDesign is more individualization of pages, not the focus of a structured document where LaTeX has its very big strength, which is describing the content in a reusable, largely reusable fashion. And that is quite independent of the underlying engine. I mean, if you think about the history, then these ideas that Leslie put into LaTeX were actually coming from a system called Scribe to a large extent. I mean, Leslie had a lot of new ideas as on top of it, and he made it popular. But the way to describe documents as structure is actually was not done in a system that had tech underneath. It had its own typesetting, which, to my understanding, was pretty horrible because it was more typewriter-like output, if you like, if my understanding is correct, because the underlying engine to actually produce the print was not very good. But so these are two different things. And if you think about a huge document like the let's take the book that I'm trying to finish for a couple of years now again, the LaTeX Companion, which has 1,600 pages.
Mhm.
So that is not going to be interactive because there are dependencies from page 1 to page 1,600, like the correct index at the end,
Right.
and all these kind of things. So what you can have, I think, and what we will see more, maybe more again, is something like instant tech, where it appears to be more or less simultaneously updating. I mean, you will remember the talk by David Fuchs a year ago, I think, and where he is working on a system where you compile real time and you have the ability to get the pages you see very naturally sort of being shown immediately when you make changes. Now, that is sacrificing some of the power of what LaTeX does, but going beyond in this direction is certainly something that I would be not surprised to see that this is happening. But this is still, in essence, a batch system. I mean, it's just a batch system that you don't really realize, because a lot of the batch processing goes in the background on stuff that you are currently not looking at. So it appears to you as if it would be instance. But from the core idea, I would say batch orientation is part of the story. And therefore, it is a different kind of thing.
Right. Well, nice to have your perspective on this. This is I mean, I try to look at this issue from the point of view of global and local, and interactivity is just like it's probably a change that happens very fast, and that you worried only about the local stuff, but the separation between local and global in LaTeX seems to be hard.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, it is right now hard in tech, but the moment you would have systems or variations of a tech engine that actually sort of mimic this kind of instant result. Like, I mean, what was it? Texture was trying to do that years ago, which again, I think it was before it was ready for something like this. But nowadays, there could be a solution not too far in the future where it appears to be instant, and then a system like LaTeX could adapt to that, I would say, so that you get more like the feeling you're actually working on an interactive system. I mean, okay, you enter in one screen, or you don't even have to. I mean, David showed in his example that you could actually enter in the output format, and it would correctly translate to the source back. So he had a two-way, if I remember correctly.
I have to watch this talk. I haven't seen it. This is interesting.
No,
it's really interesting. And this was from last year? Probably.
No,
probably
it must be 2 years ago, because it was an on-site meeting. It was the last one that I attended in sort of person to person. So it was 2 years ago.
Okay.
Last year was already pandemic. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to look for it.
That was the meeting in Palo Alto. Sorry,
right. It was.
That was the 2019 meeting in Palo Alto. You were there for a while, Paulo.
No, I was there not for the whole thing, but I had to be out for like 1 day, and that may be the day that he spoke.
Yeah, check it out. Well, it's a question. Those were not recorded.
Yes.
So it's a pity.
No, I'll look for whatever he has written up and so forth. Well, I wanted to ask you about something else too. You're also famous for a very big statement that that you have used tech on every single platform you dealt with, going back to VMS and Multics and Sun and Solaris and so forth. And mainframes and I would say even mainframes, even mainframes.
Now, mainframes was the most problematical one, actually, because mainframes are EBCDIC. So they are not ASCII, and TEG is very much ASCII. So, and they don't have a file system. Well, not one to speak of.
Yeah, well, but since the mid '80s, when tech made its way into PC and Macintosh, we have had a decent version of tech on every single operating system there is. And the last 15 years have seen tectonic shifts in operating system usage. Gartner right now says that 80% of the shipment of OS in the world are Android, iOS, and Chrome OS, Chromebooks. Yep. None of them run a decent version of tech. None of them run tech live, for example. Do you see implications of this for the future of tech?
Again, I would say no. First of all, I think your statement is not quite correct, because on iOS, at least, you get a decent enough tech to work with, and that is not using tech live, but similar. So you can install your own packages on top of what is already provided, and it comes with well, at least the last time I used it, it was already quite good.
Quite good. Yeah, no, it is. But it is the best one of the three.
Yeah, it's yeah, but the point why I think it is a no is, except for tablets are a little bit sort of in between. I think this is Apple and peers. I use my phone for an enormous amount of things these days.
Mm-hmm.
But a huge Excel sheet with 20 columns and try to enter data in it from my phone or stuff like that. And I don't think that a phone screen is in any way suitable to do programming.
Yeah, but
or to do LaTeX documents that actually sort of are more than just plain text. And I certainly think that on the tablet level, there is a gray area where you can, these days, and it will be more and more, become something like a laptop for you, both in size as well as in capabilities. But then I would expect that something like systems like TechWriter, which I think is the one that I was talking about on iOS, those and similar ones will show up to enable you to do something like a decent tech system on such tablets as well. And on the iPhone, they would work on the iPhone, but you wouldn't want to work with them on the iPhone. So the fact that you have 80% of all the sort of computer operating systems being sold nowadays being sort of these handy devices is one thing. But for programming or for doing graphic design or photograph handling or whatever, I mean, not for shooting the photograph. The iPhone is getting better and better, and the other phones as well, to do photographs. So Canon has a problem, and all these people. But if you want to post-process the stuff, you still like to have a decent screen size,
Right.
I would say. And I don't think that is going away, because that has more to do with the physics. And so the same, I would assume, is the fact when you're producing an article and you want to do research in parallel, you want to have 4 windows open to do things in parallel. And that means you're talking, you have a computer. I mean, I like to have a small laptop. Most people say, how can you work on a 13-inch laptop? And yes, it is getting problematic in some cases, which is why I also have a big desktop for stuff where a laptop doesn't work. My argument is it's the balance between nice and light, and I can sit outside in the garden with it, but I wouldn't go down to a phone. So the 80%, yes, that is the way the world goes, but that doesn't take away the 20% of the professionals doing certain kind of jobs. And I think stuff where tech plays a role, or LaTeX plays a role, will be in this 20%, and this is not going to change. And it will go into the online side. I mean, something like Overleaf is taking more and more proportion of what processing of structured, complex STEAM documents is going to happen. But again, Overleaf on the iPhone or on your Android is okay. Right. As long as you can just dictate and your text is not more complicated than that, that may be a future, that you don't have LaTeX or something, you just dictate your thing and the artificial intelligence puts your tags in. I don't know, maybe 10 years from now, who knows?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I meant more, the intermediate formats, more like the tablets and so forth. For example, the Chrome OS is running on very large laptops right now, and Microsoft has this line of computers. Their Surface laptops are tablets that work as full Windows computers.
Yeah, but those are not the 80% that Gardner is talking about, I would think. I think that's the whole stuff. And I agree with you. I mean, this proportion comes up, and this is a certain niche, or maybe it is becoming more and more than a niche. But then it wouldn't surprise me if the tech community, there is one or the other open source project that actually ports it onto that, or it is a commercial one. I mean, some of those tools that we have seen on iOS in the last years were not for free. They were for, I don't know, $10 or something, which is fine. I mean, some developers have to live sometimes, so we shouldn't be too concerned about that. But getting a decent system onto that, if the other physical parts fit with, so that there is a need. I mean, that's the point. You have to have a need. If you have a laptop or a tablet which is big enough to actually do these kind of things, then yes, I would think if enough of those shows up, then we will see that also at one point in time as an engine, supported engine, and my guess.
Well, Jersey wants to join the conversation and has a question for you.
Okay.
Does LaTeX Companion 3 and LaTeX 3, how are they related?
Say that again. Where's the
LaTeX
question?
Companion 3 and LaTeX 3, how are they related?
Well, first of all, I already said last year we try to abandon a bit the word 3, because that came back from the days when we were young and were thinking we can do this in 2 or 3 years, and then found out the problems are so hard and the computers are so slow that we couldn't do it. This kind of LaTeX 3 that we had in mind back then is never going to happen. What is happening, and as I announced that last year, is we go and take we will go and take the whole LaTeX community on a journey with very many safety nets to modernize LaTeX, rather than building a second system, which then nobody's going to use because it takes too long time to be as a system on its own usable. And so, yeah, there will be something like a modernization going on right now, and it will not take another 30 years. We are now in a position where we can actually make these kind of things. And the 3 in both cases is just because I only have time about every 10 to 15 years to write a book, and it's good that these books actually stay current for that long period of time. I can't really say that the LaTeX Companion 2 is still current, but it's still not completely useless. So
yes, it's still handy in many cases, but yes, one has to resort to what's online for packages, mostly updated and so on. Yeah.
And this is going to change, hopefully. I don't want to make promises here, but the book is in its last stages, and last stages then still means it goes to professional copy editing, and it goes to professional indexing, and I have to do the layout after the copy editing, because everybody knows that whenever you touch a system with a LaTeX text with changing a couple of words, everything changes in the line breaks. So there's still a lot of work to do in parallel to all these projects that I actually want to do, but it is the majority of the work is done, which was hard enough. I went through 5,000 packages on CTUG, documentation by documentation, made notes about what is good, what is not, tried things out, checked what has changed in various things. By the time I got around with one chapter, then 5 chapters later, this was no longer current, so I had to do it again because it was just a huge undertaking. But I think it gets around. Well, how should I say? It takes too much time sometimes, but
that's a moving target, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Sometimes it's a moving target, and which is why it is good to get a book out, because then something like
reference point, yeah,
is a reference point, and people accept that when we talked about it and decided. I mean, a lot of those things when the LaTeX Companion 2 came out were improved because I tried to explain them. I couldn't explain them. Then I talked to the author of the package, and things sort of got sorted. But then the book was out, and so the documentation said the package can do this and this and this form. And these kind of things then stayed because they were a record through the book. Because of doing the same now with the LaTeX Companion 3, but not putting the book out. I mean, I started it in 2018, I think, so it's quite a long time ago. I cannot really tell people not to change their minds when I'm not being able to actually do my promise after having sort of talked them into doing something to improve that further. So yes, it is a changing target, and which is also why it's good to finally come to a close, because then it is no longer a changing target. It's more like a point of reference.
I asked this question because perhaps it's good to make an official statement that people don't confuse those trees.
Okay. Well,
I'm waiting for the 1,600 pages or so to get my hands on. But
It will be
I'm confident. I understand that LaTeX 3, in the sense like the language and the system, is evolving, and it cannot be frozen into the book, or the book frozen into it. It doesn't. So that's
well.
well.
This is definitely independent. I mean, the work that we are currently doing. I already documented the new hook system because that is ready. That is part of the book, but everything that goes around in the tagging world, around getting accessible documents, and that will have some major improvements and functionality coming along in the next years. And this is not going to be in the book. I'm not going to wait for that. But that's not important. The book, the focus of the book is
Accessibility companion. Yeah, that's a thing to be done.
That could be a small booklet then, and that is fine. But the point of the LaTeX companion is to be a companion to your normal work, and this is about all these packages, or let's say a selection of the packages, those that I thought is worth having at your fingertips, or example, one of those from every sort of area. Like the last companion, the aim is to be in itself sufficient most of the time to do whatever you want to do in terms of LaTeX. And this is not so much about the inner workings and the improvements of design. It's more about all these packages that are out there.
Thank you for the explanations.
And thank you for this wonderful interview, Frank. Does anybody else wants to join the conversation or has any other questions for Frank? Well, with that, I'd like to
invite him to Bahotech.
Oh,
I hope that it's going to happen next year again.
Yeah,
any chance?
That chances are.
That's good.
Probably non-zero. Hopefully, the pandemic will let us get there. We might restrict the audience, like being vaccinated or some such, to be on the safe side.
That's okay. But this is what, in my case, for myself, is sort of the biggest sort of restriction right now. I was fortunate enough that because I decided to resign from say industry work, and so I was not affected by the pandemic in that sense. And I did work from home already at HP for 10 or 15 years because I was doing international work. So that would have changed anyway. But what I really missed in the last years were sort of the personal contacts, other than by email and by phone or Zoom or something, and things like those conferences. I mean, I haven't been on any since 1919, and this is sad for myself.
As Bogusław Jackowski puts it, the ideas are being created between heads. So if you have those heads together in one place and people don't go away, then there are chances for ideas, new ideas or solutions and things like that. And it's nice to hug people.
Yes, and to have a joint beer and everything.
Yeah.
All kind of things that I'm currently missing. So I'm sitting here with a glass of water. That's all.
And a glass of beer underneath the table.
I am not telling. Okay. Thanks, Paulo. Nice talking to you. Would love to see you in person. And if you're speaking, you have to put your unmute button.
Yes, no, nice to see you in person. nice to be such a good sport for an interview like this one. And I really sincerely hope that to see you all. And Bahotech is probably the best environment for all of this.
Oh yeah, Bahotech is lovely. Absolutely.
And all just the time that you have to be able to talk to people outside the the talk settings, it's absolutely wonderful. And I hope I have the courage to make that trip the next time that it happens. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.